And we are live. Hello, guys. Welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. How is everyone doing? So, welcome to this show that we're going to be having today. But before we commence the show, if you're just joining, kindly like, share, and subscribe to this channel. If you like what we do on this channel, please you can subscribe to us on Patreon, or you can become a channel member. And don't forget my crime fiction novel, a very exciting read that you would not regret getting. You would love it. So check the description of this video. The links are there. Anyhow, let's get to the conversation of today, right? So the conversation of today is talking about Vivek Ramaswamy, the Indian American guy who's running for president of the US under the Republican ticket. Now, that guy has said a whole lot of things. He keeps saying some very wild stuff, right? And he seems to have merged all the talking points of the Republican Party, all the conservative right wing talking points. Seems to have merged them with a form of egotistical stupidity, if I'll put it that way, right? And when someone talks with all the confidence, it seems as if he knows what he's talking about. It seems as if that he's right. But yeah, he might get things here and there. He might get some things here and there. Um, but some of the things he just says, they're just wild, right? So recently he named some things. He made a list of 10 things on Twitter and he said, these are 10 truths. So I'm going to be going through those 10 truths today and, just giving my thoughts on what they are. I read out those 10 truths and then take them one after the other, after which I open up the stream and people can call in and let's have a conversation. But so I don't disagree with all the 10 so-called 10 truths. There are some that I agree with, there's some I partly agree with, there are some that are just flat out nonsense, right? So I'm just going to read them out. So he listed 10 things. One, he said God is real. Two, he said there are two genders. Three, he said human flourishing requires fossil fuels. Four, he said reverse racism is racism. Five, he said an open border is no border. Six, he said parents determine the education of their children. Seven, he said nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to man. Eight, capitalism lifts people up from poverty. Nine, there are three branches of the US government, not four. 10, the US Constitution is the strongest guarantor of freedoms in history. So that's quite an interesting list. Well, it's a mundane list, really. It's a mundane list, but it's quite an interesting list. So I'll start with the first one of these quote unquote 10 truths that Vivek has listed out. The first one, he said, God is real. To which I would ask, as a Christian, yeah, of course, God is real. But to Vivek saying God is real, you've got to ask yourself, which God? Because, he is Hindu, right? And in Hinduism, there are millions of gods, right? And even if he wasn't referring to the millions of gods, even if the Hinduism was a monotheistic religion, you've got to ask yourself, which God is he referring to? Because people in the US, most of them in the Republican Party are Christians. So the idea of God, their conception of God is quite different from Vivek's conception of God. But I see what he's doing. I know what he's doing. He's trying to play to the Republican base. He's trying to play to the religious sentiment of people in the Republican base, right? He's trying to play to the religious sentiment of conservatives by saying, God is real, which is, it's so, how will I put it? It's so yuck. It's so icky. It seems like some sort of right wing virtue signaling. When you are saying God is real to these people, you do not literally mean the same God. You don't serve the same God. So you are just trying to play into their sentiments or their religious sentiments to try and get their vote. You know, that's why I think many of the things he says is just parroting right wing talking points. There's nothing original about apart from the stupid stuff that he says, right? Like when he wants people to take certain civic tests before they are before they get the right to vote. It turns out his own father is not even a US citizen. And I think up to the moment, his father never took the citizenship test. And his mother took the citizenship test after he was born. So this is the guy that rallies around against, immigrants, illegal immigrants. while his parents were basically immigrants, or you know, I may not want to use the term illegal for them, but you know, so you look at the Republican Party and say, "Oh, how much of the how much of this right wing nonsense can I just spew?" Right? Nothing. There's really nothing original about what he's saying. So that's the first point. The second point, he says that there are two genders. Of course, this one's a no-brainer, right? Of course, there are two genders. This is hardly controversial with anybody with any two brain cells, right? Now, I understand why. No, I don't understand how this is even a matter of how someone who is running for presidency thinks that this is something profound. This is a policy issue or a policy point, right? I really don't understand it. Just as DeSantis is fighting the woke, whatever that means, doesn't make any sense. Those are cultural issues. I don't think politicians should be embroiled in culture wars. I think politicians should be embroiled. They should be looking at policy positions. They should be looking at governance. They should be looking at things that they can actually do. If people are saying there are 10 genders, what exactly can a politician do about that? Even if there are two genders, we all believe that there are two genders. What exactly can a politician do about that? People are going to believe what they want to believe. People are going to be stupid. That's outside of the realm of a politician. So him saying there are two genders, yeah, meh, doesn't really nothing substantive there. Yep. So the next point he made, the next of his 10 truths, is human flourishing requires fossil fuels. This is obviously very, very false, right? Fossil fuels is not the only source of energy. Before the discovery of fossil fuels, humans have been using other sources of energy. And fossil fuels they are not, it's not an infinite resource. It's not a resource that we can use into infinity, right? It's going to stop, it's going to end at a certain point in time. And when that ends, are you going to say that human civilization is going to just cease? That human civilization is going to grant to a halt? There are other forms of energy. One very prime one that people don't look at is nuclear. Nuclear is a very clean source of energy that people are not looking at, right? So we're saying, oh, there's so many problems with fossil fuels. Of course, it's the mainstay of energy right now, driving industry, right? But we know that there are also issues. I don't want to go into the debate on, I don't want to go into the conversation of climate change and all that, because I frankly am agnostic about that. But I still think that there might be some problems. So his claim that fossil fuels, human flourishing requires fossil fuels, is patently false. There are multiple sources of energy. We can always that's the beautiful thing about technology, right? Technology would always bring solutions to human problems. There was a time we were using whale oil. There was a time the world was using coal, predominantly coal, and then it switched over to fossil fuels. Who knows? There may be some other resource that may be discovered in the future, right? That's going to that's going to revolutionize the whole energy industry. So human this thing does not human flourishing does not require fossil fuels. Then the fourth point he says is reverse racism is racism. Well, checks out. Yeah, racism is racism. There's no point in calling it reverse racism, right? Discrimination for anybody based on the color of their skin, based on their phenotypic features. Racism is racism. There is no point in making that distinction, right? Uh, there's no point in making a black top hustler. You're saying clean nuclear. You're joking, right? No, I'm not joking. People think that nuclear is some sort of yeah, nuclear is a very clean source of energy. Do some reading. An open border is no border. Well, yeah, I believe in strong borders. I believe that countries should be able to maintain their borders. I believe that countries should be able to determine who come into their country. There has to be criteria. Not everybody should just walk into a country. But if you look at the history of the US, if you want to go back to the history of the US, you will see that the US was mostly a place where people came in. It was built by immigrants, people from Europe, people from different parts of the world, people from Africa, though brought in involuntarily. But there's been waves and waves of migration into the US, right? So People coming into the US from other countries is not a new phenomenon. Now, I would agree that the peculiarities of the present day makes it a matter of urgency, or makes it much more pragmatic to be able for you to be able to manage your borders so that elements that you don't like don't come into your country, right? So essentially, I agree with that. But this an open border is no border. At times, can be a code word for anti-immigrants, or yeah. So the next point Vivek made was that he said parents determine the education of their children. Not entirely. Parents don't entirely determine the education of their children, because if they did, they'd probably just teach them at home. Parents don't know everything. That's why there is a schools. That's why there's an educational system, and that's why there is a curriculum. And it beats my imagination that these curriculums, is it that they're not unified in the US? Is it that some schools get to decide what they want to teach, right? And other schools get to decide what they want to teach? Is it, aren't there national standards that, okay, for every grade of education, this is what is going to be taught, right? So in terms of teaching mathematics, in terms of teaching the base, English, the basics of grammar and all those things, aren't there structures on ground, right? Aren't there structures on ground? Aren't there policies on ground to say this is what you know? So the idea that parents are in charge of what their children learn, not really. You're not there in a classroom all the time. You might protest days here and there, but except you want to homeschool your child, which is an option, and some people have taken it. Um, some people are backup account says I'm going through these truths pretty darn quick. Yes, I'm going through them quick because uh, nothing really, not they're not a tough nut to crack, right? They're not a tough nut to crack, so they're not something to bother myself over. So the next one is, he says the nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind. That's bollocks, right? That's obviously bollocks. The nuclear family is a very, very recent phenomenon. If you go back to human history, most people lived in communities, and the nucleus of the family wasn't the nuclear family per se, it was the extended family, mostly with the patriarch and his sons and their wives and their children. So people lived with their extended family, right? So people had influences of their uncles, they had influences from their grandfathers, they had influences from their mothers, they had influences from their grandmothers, they had influences for so many family members. To me, the nuclear family itself is a dysfunction, right? Where people uh, isolate themselves into this very tiny unit, and then there's no support, there's no support system. And that's why the family is in problem these days, because the parents are too busy working. There is nobody to keep an eye on the kids. There are no support structures to look at these children, right? If the father is not there, the mother is not there. And with the realities of the 21st century, where both parents have to work to make ends meet, the nuclear family is a disaster, right? It's not so fundamentally different from a, how will you call it, a single parent home. If both parents are working, that's as good as a single parent home, because you don't have the time for your children. Um, you don't have the time to see what they're doing. So you basically leave them to the peers. Children are then raised by the peers. But before, children were raised by the communities. Children were raised by extended family members. Children were raised by their uncles, by their fathers, by their grandfathers. A whole lot of people were there um, you know, to raise children, right? So the next one, capitalism lifts people up from poverty. Yes, I agree, but then there's a caveat, right? Capitalism lifts people from poverty, but it's not a win-win situation. There are clear losers in a system like capitalism. There are winners and there are clear losers, right? That's why companies compete, right? You want to have the best of this. You want to have, because it's a game where some people have to lose for some people to win. right? And if you look at the history of capitalism and you see all the shit that has been done in the name of capitalism, you would see that, right? Even till today, right? There are people in China that are working in horrid conditions just so people in the West can have their, you know, the fancy goods, right, at a cheap price. There are people who throw themselves off their working buildings to kill themselves, to commit suicide, because it's just so draining. And then they have these nets underneath the buildings to catch these people and just take them back to working in horrid conditions. There are people in mines in Africa who are children mining things, mining precious metals under horrid conditions, right? Under you know war zones. There are wars that be sponsored in these countries just so that these minerals can be taken at a cheap price. People are paying the price for the luxury that other people have, and they say, oh, it's capitalism, it's a free exchange. No, people literally died in Iraq for oil because of US interest in oil in Iraq. People died. So so yeah, capitalism, or whatever you call it, right, is lifts people from poverty. It also puts other people in poverty and destroys uh, people as well. There are three. The next one, he said there are three branches of the US government, not four. I don't know why I even needed to make this point. Who is saying it is four? And the last one, the US constitutes the US Constitution is the strongest guarantee of freedoms in history. This is patently false. Like false, like very, very false. Let us even go back to the founding of the US, right? And the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, while literally holding other men as slaves. Such a contradiction. So the US Constitution has been a contradiction from the get go, right? You are declaring that all men are created equal, right? Yet, under that same Constitution, many people were held as slaves. Under that same Constitution, women did not have the same rights as white men. Even white women did not have the same rights as white men. Up until the very, very, very recent past. And then after slavery, there were a whole bunch of other things. There were a whole bunch of other legalized form of discrimination against people of different classes, against people of different backgrounds. So if the US Constitution is the greatest, if it's the greatest form of, the strongest guarantor of freedom in US history, how come for most of US history, many people were in bondage, were in legal bondage, women were in legal bondage? How come? And something that strikes me as very hypocritical in terms of this preaching of all freedoms, we are spreading freedom, we are spreading democracy, we are spreading this to different parts of the world, especially with the time with the Cold War, with the war against communism and all that. Oh, the US is going into Vietnam, they're going into Korea, they're trying to liberate those countries from the tyranny of communism. Yet in their own countries they had legalized discrimination. It's so mind blowing. The cognitive dissonance it will take for you to go to another man's land and say, I want to free you from, I want to free you from oppression, while literally having other people oppressed in your own country. So that point is obviously, bollocks, right? Obviously bollocks. So uh, those are Vivek Ramaswamy's quote and unquote 10 points, which, to me, some of them, yeah, here and there, some of them just meh, doesn't make any sense. So I'll open up the stream. Anyone that wants to call in, let's have a chat about this. Tell me what you think about these points as raised by Vivek. If you think he's right, if you think he's not, so I'm waiting. Then let me read some comments as I'm waiting. Okay, Lost Sabres here. Harry, of course. The black laptop hustler is here, and that's Templar, of course. Yeah, he said Vivek is two-faced. His narrative changes according to the audience. Of course, isn't that how all politicians are? Politicians have no principles. They are only they're only beholden to the votes. They're only beholden to power. They want to win at all costs. So, they'll just look for anything that they'll say anything to get the votes. They'll say anything, absolutely anything. When they go to one demographic, they'll say something entirely different when they go to another demographic. So it's not surprising. Free zone, salute Charles on the chat. Free zone, how you doing? If you're around, come on up. Let's have a conversation. Backup account said another Indian craving power. Well, it's nothing wrong for Indians to crave power, right? But he just puts the right wing grift on a national level. He just puts it on a full throttle. Like, let me bring all the talking points. That's the funny thing about this about, about these conservative politicians. They are hardly original. Now, almost all of them want to be a wannabe Trump, right? Everybody is fashioning themselves. They're making themselves after the image of Trump. They're just, taking Trump's talking points, right? In a way, Trump was even much more original than these guys. I mean, before Trump came into power, none of the Republicans were talking about the rise of China or how to combat it. None of them were really talking about immigration. None of them were talking about some of the other stuff that Trump brought to the forefront. They were not, but now they're parroting all those points as though it was their own. The other day, Larry Elder, another dummy, was was crying that Vivek was stealing his talking points, and I was like, "Good Lord, stealing your talking points?" Because he was pointing out fatherlessness in black communities. Come on, dude, you're not the first person to come up with that. Different people have been talking about things for that for decades. So for you to say, "Oh, Vivek is stealing my talking points," just seems so silly in the part of Larry Elder. Probably that's why nobody takes him seriously, right? Um, Free zone low evening, governor. Okay. Backup account says nuclear waste is an issue. Yes, nuclear waste is an issue, right? But I think that we can come up with creative ways of managing nuclear waste. I think that can be done. And I think there are some countries that do nuclear, right? And they, you know, they they find a way. I think we can find a way. Um, Templar says, okay, backup account says, oh, Templar, DeSantis against rainbows in schools. No, is that not policy? That's not policy. That's just woke stuff, right? That's woke stuff, anti-woke stuff. Anti-woke stuff is not policy. People do what they want to do. How does that translate into anything tangible for people? How does that affect the economy? How does that affect security? How does that affect tangible things that the government, if people are saying, we need limited government, we need little government interference, then why should it be your business? If people are saying there are 10 genders, of course I don't subscribe to that, but you, everybody do themselves. If that's what you want to think, if you think that if you're a man, you think you're a woman, good for you. I don't think the government should have to come in to step in to intervene at that point in time. Is literally not the point. No business of the government. But this is the thing that that really irks me about conservatives. They believe in small government as long as it's not affecting the position that they care about. But when it's something they care about, they believe they want to invoke government. Oh, government should step in. Government has to step in. But for some other things, they'll be like, oh no, government shouldn't step in because we believe in small government. But you've got to be consistent, right? Do you want small government or you don't want small government, right? So if you know you are going to be invoking a government for some issues that you don't like, then you don't really like small government. You're just conveniently picky. You're just choosing things conveniently. All right. So Stanley's here.
Hey,
Stanley. Hey Stanley, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm
Um,
sorry I'm late. I missed the uh, Vivek part. Did you show any
yeah,
of the
yeah.
video?
No, I didn't show the video. I read the list of 10 things, quote unquote 10 truths.
Oh,
Maybe I'll
okay.
just read them again and I try to react to them. So he said 10 truths. Number one, God is real. Number two, there are two genders. Number three, human flourishing requires fossil fuels. Number four, reverse racism is racism. Five, an open border is no border. Six, parents determine the education of their children. Seven, the nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind. Eight, capitalism lifts people up from poverty. Nine, there are three branches of the US government, not four. 10, the US Constitution is the strongest guarantor of freedoms in history. So those were the quote and unquote 10 truths from Vivek. So I took
Well,
each
you
one.
know what? Nine of them are right in context. The one
Mm,
about fossil fuels,
mm,
I it goes against his point about innovation, which isn't in
mhm.
his 10 points, but
Yeah.
one of the things he's famous for is like, you know, people, Americans in particular,
Mhm.
we can you remember you have you ever seen The Martian, that movie about a dude stranded on Mars, where he said, I'm gonna have to science my way out of this problem?
Mm,
Um, that's generally Vivek and all these tech bros.
mm,
Science can solve everything,
mhm.
technology, innovation can solve a lot of problems. Therefore, that point about, we need gasoline and we have to drill more, that's
Mm,
the only weakness I find in his 10 points. The rest of it is just out of context.
mm. True, true. Because before there was fossil
And
fuels.
I'm not going to debate number one with you because I'll never
Well,
win that argument.
well, I took issues with number one because when he says God is real, yeah, as a Christian, yeah, God is real. But which God is
I'm
Vivek
not going to
talking
debate
about?
that with you because
Which
you're right.
No, no, no.
For
My
you,
point is which God is Vivek talking about? He's Hindu, and in
he's,
Hinduism they have
oh, that, okay.
they
I'm
have
confusing him.
multiple they have multiple gods.
Well,
So
no, you have to be careful. Hindus think all gods are real. You have to talk to Anan on this. And it's fascinating. Actually, Hinduism is awesome in that respect. I think in I just heard Anan talk on the topic, and I'm by no means an expert, so I'm not going to go too deep on it, but that Vivek thinks that is not surprising if he
so
is
so
Hindu. It's not
so
surprising, and he thinks that's true, and I
I
think it's wonderful.
so so my premise of him, I think, of course, I don't debate that, right? But I think what he's doing is when he's saying God is real, he's speaking to mostly Christians. He's speaking to mostly conservative Christians in America, right? Most of
No,
them
he has an Indian background. He's also talking to Muslims.
is also talking to Muslims. Well,
I think so.
the Muslims don't recognize his gods. The Muslims think
Well,
his
that's
gods are
true, but
the
well,
Christians don't recognize his gods either. So him
well,
bringing
that's
up
an
that
interesting
point,
point.
him
But
bringing
why
God.
should he base his beliefs on what Muslims think of his philosophy?
So I think he should not have raised God in the first place because him bringing up
I
God is
agree with that.
he was trying to play into the religious
Mm-hmm.
sentiments of conservatives, of
Mm-hmm.
Republicans. But
Yep.
if you want to drill it
But
down, they don't believe in the quote and unquote God you're talking about. So which God,
mm-hmm.
right? So
But I
it seems
said,
silly.
nine of those 10 points are very contextual.
Yep.
Depends on who you say them to,
Yep.
because a good portion or decent portion of the electorate aren't going to agree in each and every one of those points.
Hmm.
You go and you tell the ADOS community that reverse racism is racism, you're going to get like at least 50% of the ADOS community saying, what? And you're
Yeah, but
right,
what?
it's tailored to um, Republicans.
Yeah, but what's reverse racism? If I may ask, what do you think reverse racism
Well,
is?
good. You're familiar with affirmative action, of course.
Yeah.
Essentially, if there is affirmative action which gives preference to non-whites, essentially, well, it's the zero-sum game. if you are preferring blacks, Hispanics, etc., there are white people who are losing out. Like there is a probably smarter white person who did better on scores, SAT scores, had a higher GPA, that sort of thing. So if you prefer a black or an Indian, a Native American, there's a white person or an Asian person, recently with the Supreme Court decisions that are losing out.
Mm.
So that's reverse racism. If a black person gets into Harvard, that means a white person didn't. That's
So,
literally their
so
definition of reverse racism.
I think I disagree, right? I don't think most people, when they use the word reverse racism, they're referring to something like affirmative.
Vivek did.
Well, so um, if you look at the term reverse racism, it's a
Dude,
very
I've lived with it.
it's it I think it's a very recent coinage, right? Which is used to refer to situations where um, where a white person is interacting with another person, maybe a black person, or quote unquote a person of color, and the black person does something to the white person that would be termed as normal racism, right? Normally termed
No,
racism, and then they say,
that's
"Oh,
not.
this is reverse racism."
Your impression is wrong. Go back to Baki in 1976.
Mm.
Reverse racism is literally, if you ever go and read Supreme Court or any of the legal briefs and stuff like that on reverse racism, it's literally in the legal documentation.
Okay,
So
so send.
it's not how black people deal with white people on an individual basis. It's literally a legal term.
All right, send me some resources. I'll check it out. So,
Um, I, check the legal literature. It's not what you think it is. It is a technical term.
so
You can look
this
it up.
this point, the nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind. What do you think about that?
Um, governance. I don't know that nuclear families ever think of is raising children governance. So I don't know. I understand what he means. I don't think that I haven't governed my son to 17. I raised him. I, did a lot of things. And I think there are my, and where I'm going with this point, my son hasn't had a nuclear family for like 11 years.
Mm. So
And he's fine.
I think the point he's driving at is that the he's trying to extol the virtues of the nuclear family, like the greatest form of family. However, of which I disagree, right? I disagree
Interesting.
that, yeah, I think that for most of human history, the nucleus of the
Yes.
family wasn't even the nuclear family, it was the extended family unit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where there was a patriarch with his sons and his sons' wives, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
there was this community, right? So people were raised not only by their immediate family, but by their extended family. And that gave sort of a support structure, right,
Mm-hmm.
to the family unit, which is very, very lacking in the nuclear family today. So I think the nuclear family is an aberration. I think it's a function of the 21st century. It's not the
Mm-hmm.
ideal form of family structure, right? Now take
I
a
would e-
situation.
I would go I'd be more harsh than you're being. Um even even in American history, the nuclear family, Thomas Jefferson didn't have a nuclear family.
Mm,
Washington and his wife never had kids.
mm,
But they had nephews that were raised.
mhm,
They had, kids whose mother had died or father had died. And They would take them in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Alexander Hamilton, uh, another one of my founders. He was literally he wasn't even born in the United States. He had like benefactors who were non-family members
Mm-hmm.
who thought he was really smart and he would be like, he had a lot of potential. They sent him to America as like a 12-year-old. When
Mm-hmm.
he got when Alexander Hamilton got to the United States, he had zero family that I know of. He was basically an orphan. So I will admit, and I think what Vivek should have said is it's optimal, but not the only way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Go back to the 70s and watch The Waltons, one of these old timey American TV shows. There was a huge extended family. Extended
Mm-hmm.
family can be like a brother who's 20 years older.
Mm-hmm.
I think I agree with you. This notion of it must be a nuclear family. Even Glenn Lowry didn't have that kind of family. Maybe he wishes he did, but he didn't have it. Um, there are workarounds, and your historical argument, your argument about how family worked in Africa, excellent argument, and you're right.
Yeah, so there's this romanticism of the nuclear family, like, oh, it's the end and be all. And considering the realities of the 21st century, where
Hmm.
both parents are working, it's
Hmm.
it's as
Oh,
it's as
absolutely.
it's as good as not even having any parents. If
Hmm.
there are no parents in the home to even keep an eye on the children, then it's worse.
Totally agree.
So what's the point?
I have zero pushback.
So let's look at this one. Capitalism lifts people up from poverty.
It does, but it's not, again, like the family, it's not the only system that lifts people up.
Hmm.
So did Genghis Khan. was was Genghis Khan and his family, were they capitalists? Power lifts people up. Gaining power lifts people up.
Mm,
There are people. If you go back to the you go back even to the pinnacle of Western culture, Western
mm,
white culture, the British monarchy. Um, there were kings who were at the pinnacle who were beheaded.
mm,
Look at the French Revolution.
mhm,
Power doesn't necessarily, you might achieve power, but that doesn't mean you're going to have it forever.
mhm,
And the French monarchy wasn't technically capitalist the way American capitalism is. American capitalism literally got rich creating a system of racial, legal, encoded racism.
mm. Because if you look at capitalism, the for me the most defining feature of capitalism is profit, right?
Hmm.
And if you look at
Well,
something
no,
like
that is capitalism. You can't be a capitalist if you're not looking at profit.
mm, and the profit incentive makes people do a whole bunch of
Hmm.
bad things, right? If you let's take slavery for example. I know people will say we
Hmm.
overflog slavery. What's more profitable than having a workforce that you don't get to pay, right? So you get free, cheap
Well,
labor.
there's an argument. If you go back um, to the early 19th century, there was a whole debate on whether, because if you have slavery, in particular African slavery, you would have to, slaves were not, slaves were gonna not as hard as they could because A, they were suffering. There's a, and I will send you the links and maybe a book or two. There was a whole debate back in the early 19th century on whether free labor versus slave labor was more profitable and or more efficient. There
Mm.
is a whole, there's literally, if you ever do economic history, it's rich in this kind of debate.
Yeah, but the people at that time who were instituting that, they were not looking at comparative analysis. They were looking at how do I
Yeah, actually they were.
produce how do I produce how do I produce my goods for as
Right.
cheaply as possible, right? And slaves seem to be the best way to do that. You don't have to pay them.
I'm gonna have to push back a bit, and I'm not gonna go farther. I will. I promise. I'll send you the books and a couple articles. The reason it's more complicated than, was slave labor more profitable than free labor? When I say free labor, I mean like, white workers in the north. It's a little bit
Mm.
more complicated than that.
All right. Wolf, welcome to the conversation. How you doing?
Wolf.
Yeah, Charles, I tried to click the thing. That's why I said it. I tried to click the link a couple times, but it kept saying the link was broken. But then after like
Oh,
the sixth time, it let me in. I think I'm
oh,
having the same issues you had yesterday.
oh, it's all
Um,
right. So, were you able to catch any part of my monologue?
yeah, I don't know everything that Vivek said, but I have a solution to the Mexico issue. I think it don't even have to involve an invasion. I mean, we can literally say to the Mexican government, hey, if you guys don't address the issue with the cartels that's causing people to flee, then your money is going to be cut off. Make them hold the cartels accountable.
Can't do that.
I don't see why you can't, because if the
Well,
cartels
let
are
me
causing
ask
the
you a
issue,
question.
well, hold on, Stanley, hold
Who
on.
is America's biggest trade partner
Biggest
currently?
trade partner is actually China, believe it or not.
Nope.
I disagree with that.
Mexico just took over in the last 2 or 3 months.
2 or 3 months, that's not long enough,
No,
Stanley,
I'm
to argue that.
literally not making this up. Google it. Mexico is America's biggest trade partner.
Okay, okay,
We are
Stanley.
not going to invade Mexico.
So, Stanley, ask you a question. Do you trust 2 or 3 months, or do you trust 30 plus years of
No, I
data?
literally trust the economists, and you're an
Uh,
economist.
and two or three
Trust
months
your
ain't long enough,
trust your
Stanley.
folks.
You
Trust
need a
your
census
people.
data. You
Stanley,
need a
let him
census
finish his
data.
point.
You need a
I'm
census
just
data. And what I mean is this, right? Like, I don't agree with invading Mexico because you're only going to cause more instability. But the Mexican government is the one that needs to deal with the cartels. It's not the US's job to deal with the cartels. That's the main issue. And if we know about the slave trade, Mexico is similar in the aspect that it's very good for agriculture, it's good for other things. We need to address that. Help them do what they need to do with the cartels. I don't agree with invading it though, but the Mexican government needs to say, hey, this is an issue, and they need to stop acting like the cartels are not an issue.
well, I'm gonna push back a little bit.
Yeah.
Mexico, a large part of
Okay,
Mexico's
okay. So
hold on,
guys,
part of Mexico's GDP is money being sent back from Mexicans who come to America.
Yeah.
uh, so Stanley and Wolf, this the Mexico conversation was in the last stream, so
Hmm.
Well,
we
and I
were not
was
gonna.
addressing that, Charles, because I'm sorry. Like, can you put up the
My bad.
what
I'll
was
shut up.
Vivek's things? I don't
Hmm,
know everything that Vivek said. I only know what he said about the border.
okay, so he said
So I
he
apologize
tweeted.
about that.
No issues. He tweeted a couple of things, and I was just reacting
Okay.
to his list of 10 things. And maybe I'll read them again. You can react to anyone you think. One, he
Mm-hmm.
said God is real. Two, he said there are
Okay.
two genders. Three, he said human flourishing requires fossil fuels. Four, he said reverse racism is racism. Five, an open border is no border. 6, parents determine the education of their children. 7, the nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind. 8, capitalism lifts people up from poverty. 9, there are three branches of the US government, not four. 10, the US Constitution is the strongest guarantor of freedoms in history.
Wow, that's a lot. um, well, Charles, we could take an example from where you're at. I don't think that the nuclear household is enough. I've talked to Stanley about this. You also need to have good neighbors, Charles, and I've said this to you. You
Mhm.
can't just say it's the parents. You also need good neighbors. You need a good community. And a lot of the ADOS community and the subsection are struggling because we don't trust our neighbors, right? And that's a
Mhm.
big issue. We need to be able to trust our neighbors and not just rely on the parents, because the parents, you can't sit there and expect them to be there 24/7 because mom and dad got to work. So
Mhm.
you need a good neighborhood community. As far as the the gender thing, I mean, I don't understand the science behind it. I mean, I'm more
That
conservative in
goes
that
that
approach. So yeah. Now go ahead,
that
Charles.
goes without saying. There are two. I say that goes without saying. Of course, there are two genders, right?
Yeah.
Anybody who believes otherwise,
You know,
yeah, go
Oh,
check themselves.
like I'm
I
sorry,
will
but
mute.
I'm sorry. I know this controversial, Charles. I'm sorry if your channel gets struck. I'm gonna say it.
Gender is not sex.
And
Uh,
it's complex because see, people that are, more liberal will disagree. But to me, you do have the what are they called? Hermaphrodites, I think is the technical term.
yeah, there
It
are always
is so
exceptions.
rare, it's not worth considering.
Exactly. So there are always exceptions. Exceptions do not make the rule. In fact, they reinforce the rule. That's why they are exceptions.
Yeah.
Except if you're a Republican. My joke. It's a joke. It's a joke.
Yeah. And Stanley, brother, like I got nothing but love for you. So no, don't take anything I'm saying as hot
Oh,
shot.
you know how, dude. I I know.
Like I've
You're
said it
cool.
before, I'm an old school Republican. I'm not one of these new MAGA Republicans. I don't like that shit.
So
So,
You're not old enough to be an old school Republican.
well, my mindset is that way, right? Because I can understand some
See,
arguments. Um, and we'll have some disagreements, so I'll leave the gender thing alone. Um, Religion, I mean, I think every person, whether you're atheist or is it monotheistic or atheo? What is the term, Charles, for multiple gods? I can't remember.
polytheistic.
polytheism.
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 I think everybody should be open to the idea that there is a potential for a God to exist, even if you don't believe. I think that's a fair argument.
Eek.
So I don't think it's a fair, at least from my point of view as a Christian, it's an all or none thing. Yeah, you don't get
Yeah,
to be in the middle. You don't get to, well, maybe God exists, maybe it doesn't exist. You either have to be in or you're out. You either have to
yeah,
believe that it exists or you don't believe that it exists. So that's the
yeah.
way I
Oh,
see it.
I have jokes.
I do personally, but Charles, I'm trying to be fair. And what I say is this, right? Until science can prove it with beyond a shadow of a doubt, I think everybody should be open to the idea. That's all I'm saying.
I think everybody should believe.
After like 10,000 years, religion in one way, shape, or form has literally existed in
Yeah,
Homo sapiens for like 10,000 years.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
religion
there's a
has
lot of
always existed.
technicalities.
Religion has always existed from since the beginning
Well,
of
Well,
human history.
from my point of view, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend.
yeah. So, Charles, can you put it up on the screen? Because I know you read it off, but I caught like the
Yeah,
first five or six. I'm sorry to, bug you about it, but I want to make sure I
yeah.
can remember everything you said.
So I can't put it up, but I can read up some
Yeah,
other points again.
what was 6 through 10 again? If you can repeat it real
So
quick.
six was parents determine the education of their children,
Okay.
right? 7, the nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind.
Okay.
Uh, 8, capitalism lifts people up from poverty.
Mm-hmm.
9, there are three branches of the US government, not four.
Mm,
10, the US Constitution is the strongest guarantor of freedoms in history.
gotcha. I mean, Documents wise, I don't know. I don't believe the Constitution was the most freest document. I don't believe that the nuclear family. Obviously, I already told you, Charles. It takes more than two people to raise a kid. I think it's better if you have a whole community. Um, as far as the capitalism aspect, I've talked to you about this before. I'm a capitalist, but it has its flaws. Communism has its flaws, but I think that if both systems are run properly and run accurately by the book, it could work. But the problem is neither one of them are. Take two examples. You have Joseph Stalin and how he did his shit, which was horrendous. And then the CCP, of course. But then you have America's
Hmm.
form of capitalism, which is corrupt as shit and is
Hmm.
actually not really true capitalism by the book. So
You know what? You and I will talk because I actually agree with your assessment.
yeah,
So let's talk about the last one. The U.S. Constitution is the strongest guarantor of freedoms in history.
I don't agree with that. Depending on who
Um,
you are.
well, I'm just going to sound so pedantic. Um, Frederick Douglass, the Constitution is a weapon, and much like many American history and the legal documents that created it, it can be
Mm,
manipulated.
yeah,
It is so vague that oftentimes you can make the Constitution made slavery, then it got rid of slavery. It is so just
yeah.
Was it the Constitution that got rid of slavery or Lincoln's Declaration that got
no,
rid of
literally.
slavery?
No. Lincoln was a big believer in the Constitution, quite frankly, and the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah,
But the Constitution compromised with slavery, and then the Constitution got rid of slavery. But what did they have to do with it? They had to create a 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment,
yeah,
and they still didn't get it right. So the
right.
Constitution was amended to get rid of the original mistake, and
Yeah.
people just don't seem to understand that.
Well, and
The
Charles, to tie.
Constitution, my bad.
Oh no, go ahead, Stanley. Go ahead, finish real quick. I'll go after you.
I'm done.
Charles, you have to add this in too, right? Because see, I had a conversation with somebody about this that watches your channel, and I
Mm.
said it's not so much about the present day document as it is the historical context. People love to talk about the present day document, but the Declaration of Independence refers to Native Americans as savages.
Mm.
And you can't
Yes.
deny that. You can't overlook that because see, that stuff is still used. Like the Declaration of Independence has
Yep.
been used in the Supreme Court before.
Yep.
Therefore, the document stands. Like,
And better than that, they blame slavery and Indians, Native Americans, on England.
Yeah,
That is the amazing part. If you ever, Wolf, you carry
yeah,
on because you nailed it.
yeah,
so I'm going to diss Americans right now. So you know how Americans like to say African Americans don't take responsibility. They like to blame someone else.
mm-hmm,
I think it's an American trait because
hundred
there's
percent.
hardly anything that America doesn't blame someone else. Even the conservatives, hardly anything. It's the woke. Oh, it's Putin. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. Oh, it's the media. Oh, it's
Charles,
the Matrix. Oh, it's so the victim narrative is literally like American culture. Like
dude, you
it's
know
not
what?
something that was invented by black people in America. Black people
Hundred
were just
percent.
keeping with American culture. Blame everybody else but yourself. Take no even look
I'm
at Trump. Look at Trump. He's blaming
oh,
everybody but his incompetent ass. He's blaming everybody. So interesting.
you know what, Charles? I'm gonna push back on that so hard. I'm gonna convince you. Damn, you're wrong.
Mm. Yeah, so let me take
So,
some comments. SKC said, do you think that certain cultural values can erode governments? Do I think cultural values can
I
erode
think
governments?
SKC's culture
well,
can
Charles, if you
erode
can,
government.
SKC, I would love for SKC to call in if he could, because I want to
Yeah,
hear his thoughts on this too, if he wants to come up.
And in the meantime, let me describe SKC's thoughts and criticize them. I'm joking.
Because, like Charles, you are correct, and see, here's where people got to get this right. This whole aspect, and I'm sorry I'm going off topic a little bit, but I'll bring it back. This whole aspect about the black community, black culture, the violence and shit. Do people not remember the Wild Wild West and the white cowboys that were killing each other, robbing banks, doing all of this shit in the 16, 17, 1800s? It wasn't black folks that invented this. We adopted a format of American culture.
Hey, Wolf, I have a story and I'm going to send you the
Like,
link. I'm going to send you the link where Pretty Boy Floyd, the white gangster,
yeah.
tried to rob a bank in an Oklahoma town that was all black.
Mm.
It is hilarious.
And let's just call it what it is. And I'm not trying to just rain on white people here, but don't get it twisted, bro. The mafia existed long before the Bloods and Crips. And the mafia was doing some heinous shit to people. So let's just call it what it is, bro. Are you going to hold the white folks accountable who were mafia members terrorizing other people? You can't just say it's the black culture because there was white culture too that was doing the exact same thing.
Well, I hope SKC calls in because I'm just going to make the comment that you cannot abstract Black American culture from American culture. It is a subset or a branch of. But I was listening to someone the other day, rag on, black people this, black people that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what? It's an American problem.
Yeah.
The problem is America wants to section off the blacks
Yep.
from the
mhm,
general problem. And the same thing with other types of America has a history of that too. The Italian, the mafia
Yep.
the
Same thing.
isn't
Jews.
is the Jew. They're not they are a separate problem from an
Yeah.
American problem.
Because
That's just
Charles,
ridiculous.
and Charles, this is what I'm gonna say, right? And here's an issue that we need to understand. See, Charles, say for example that you immigrated here tomorrow, you are automatically gonna get hit with the same stereotypes just because of your skin color. You are gonna pay for the sins of other people that you didn't commit. And it's not fair because they're gonna
No,
say, oh, he's black, okay, he must be on this type of shit or this type of shit. And it's just
Charles
like,
is
I
going to
don't
hang
like
out
that.
with his big brother, and I'm not going to let that happen.
I'm going straight up to Texas if I ever come to America.
And that's
Well,
what I'm
you
trying to
better
get
come
through.
to Atlanta.
No, Texas.
Because Charles, and this is what I'm trying to say, and this is the main disagreement I have with SKC, which is why I would want him to come up. It's like, bro, you can't sit here and tell me with a straight face that the black community is helpless and all that. Because I've seen black people that want to do better. It's just you need to understand there is systemic racism in this country that has never been addressed. And the moment you start to address it, you will help these people. But if you keep ignoring it and you keep denying it and you keep speaking around it, there's going to be a constant conflict there. We don't hate white people. We never have.
Wait, hold it. Black Laptop Hatcher, the American experiment is supposed to be self rectifying? What the? This dude.
And that's
Thank
what I'm
you,
saying,
Black
bro.
Laptop. Thank you, Blacktop Hustler, for that contribution to what America is supposed to be.
It's like, bro,
Dude, come
because
come and visit us, Black Lap.
Charles, here's the issue, right? It's Charles, you know this. I've told you this. I broke down the hood dynamics on the stream. It's like, bro, you can't write these people off. If you do that, you don't have You don't have dignity as a, I don't respect you as a man or a woman if you're willing to just say these people are hopeless. Because some of these people can be helped. I was one of them. I know other people that have been there, but they don't understand it in the same context, because you have to understand there is systemic stuff that has happened. And it's easy to say that as a black person who's never experienced it, or a person that don't give a damn, that's just sitting here praying on the downfall. But I'll put it this way, bro, a lot of blacks that I talk to that sit here and pray on the downfall, that's that coon shit, because a lot of them benefit from the destruction of their own people. That's that tap dancing shit, Charles, I've told you about with Officer Tatum and these other black people like Candace Owens and shit. And I don't like that shit, bro, because you're
Tate,
making
Tate,
Well,
money off the death of
temper
the
Tatum
your
is the
people.
language.
worst. Tatum is the
Really?
worst. Like
I
Tatum is, I can't stand
he
Officer Tatum. I
he
literally
is
can't
the
stand him.
Black Trump.
Yeah, Officer Tatum's bad. Bro, that dude is such a clown. I can't Charles anymore. I try, I can't, dog.
The thing that really got me ticked off with Tatum wasn't even really his race stuff. It was his police stuff, right? The
Yeah,
police can literally
No.
do no wrong. Like police could literally just shoot someone for no reason, and Tatum will find a way to justify it.
right.
Maybe because he was a cop, but even if you were a cop, you can't just you can't just side with the police every damn incident, every damn time. I used to watch him a lot,
Well, it
right?
goes back to the point about critical thinking. He's not a critical thinker. Cops are human, they can be wrong. And that, he thinks the benefit of the doubt automatically goes to the cops. That's been America's problem all along.
So,
Lack of critical thinking.
yeah,
And Mr. Black, Mr. Laptop, who was it? Um, he said he has never
reasonable,
experienced
right?
racism.
They started out reasonable, and then either they got captured by their audience, or they've just devolved into an echo chamber of right-wing nonsense, right? It's like they got stupider the more they listened to other right-wing people, and
Yes.
trying to stick it to the woke. They couldn't think anymore. They were just being reactionary, and it just stunted their thinking. uh, and
Well, I wouldn't say stunt as much as enhanced. Um, what is a parallel? Um, I would say,
Charles
yeah,
and Stanley, I want to share this story real quick. I told Stanley this
okay.
story a couple months ago to Deacon. Deacon, you said you've never experienced racism. Okay, I want to ask SKC and Deacon, I want to ask both of y'all this question. Back in Labor Day of last year, or it might have been July 4th this year, somewhere around there. So I got in a traffic stop. I'm not going to give my location out there because there's weird people on the internet, but I got pulled over. It was a DUI traffic stop. The cop was white. He came up and he said, "Sir, we're doing the traffic stop. I want to check this." I didn't have my driver's license on me. I left my wallet in my work. If you want to make that argument that, okay, well, he had a right to pull you over, fine. But the moment he pulled me over, he started being extremely different towards me versus the white guys that he had pulled over, asking me questions like, "Oh, well, do you have alcohol in the car? Do you have a gun in the car? Do you have X, Y, and Z in the car?" Y'all cannot tell me with a straight face that that was not racism. And even if you want to make the case that's not the majority, this is what black people go through in America on a daily basis. That we get asked questions, bro. Even if you're dressed right, it don't matter. This cop pulled his gun on me, a whole bunch of shit. And people want to sit here and tell me, bro, my life could have been took. I'm not gonna sit here and play this dice roll game with the cops when I'm compliant and following the rules. When the white folks are getting treated equally, I'm sorry, bro, that's not fair to me. You're not
Well,
gonna tell me it
tell
was.
us the part about where the black lieutenant
Yes,
came and
yes.
level set everything. This
If
is
it was
why
not,
this is
bro,
why you need black people in
like, bro,
positions of power.
because this guy was from the city where I'm at. The people that know where I'm at. But again, it's the internet, Charles, so I'm not gonna put it out there for everybody. But This black lieutenant pulled up and he actually criticized his white officer and said, "You can't be doing this, making this man feel uncomfortable like that." He had his fucking gun drawn, y'all. Four white guys surrounding my car, and the white folks is just sitting over there waiting on the checkup. You can't tell me with a straight face, bro. And he's like, "Sir, I want your registration." Well, I have a concealed carry. I always do. If I reach in there to get that, y'all honest to God truth think he ain't gonna pull that gun and put bullets in me? Because I bet you money he would. And my response is, don't tell me, bro, that there ain't kind of racism, because there is.
Well,
It exists.
there's reasonable doubt. Orlando Castile.
And he's just telling me, he's like, "Sir, you need to comply and do what I say." I'm sorry, y'all. I'm not gonna do that because I have the registration and the gun in the dash. And if I reach for it, he can have probable cause and say, "Okay, he's going for the gun. I have the right to kill him." And then guess what happens, bro? I end up on the news, and what's gonna happen? Nothing.
So I have a question for has a question for you
Mm-hmm.
guys, right? America, the Second Amendment guarantees the right to bear arms, right?
Yeah.
So, which means that you have to assume that everybody is armed in America, at least in quote legally, right? Why is the police so skittish for a legal something that is legal? I mean, there was a
Oh,
time where the
Oh
police went
boy.
to a man's house to knock. He didn't know they were the police. He came out with his gun and they shot him in his
Yeah.
own house. When there are so many things that are violated there. First of all, the castle doctrine, right? The man has the right to protect himself within his
Mm-hmm.
castle, right?
they've
Number
taken it
two,
way farther than the castle doctrine. Wolf, you go
Yeah.
num-
first.
yeah,
Yeah.
let me.
And
I'm
Charles,
not
just
done.
so there's
I'm
no
not done. I'm not
confusion.
Harold
done. I'm not
Anderson.
done, guys. I'm not done.
Oh,
Number
sorry, Charles. Go
two,
ahead.
number two, they had the legal right to bear arms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why would the police
No,
immediately seeing a gun act in such a skittish manner and just shoot at him? For guns are not illegal in the US. So why are the police always skittish when they see a gun? Without you have to presume that that gun is legal first, in my opinion. Since guns are not illegal, you have to presume that this is
no,
illegal.
you cannot presume the law doesn't work that way. The Second
Okay,
Amendment
tell me.
doesn't work that way.
Well,
There are plenty of people who are having guns. It, dude, this could be a whole show in and of itself.
yeah,
Cops
I agree.
should not presume that if a dude with a gun, you cannot presume it's legal because there's so many illegal guns.
Well, and Charles, here's the caveat, right? Now, I want to make this clear to everybody. My guns are 100% legal. I have them registered through gun dealers. I bought them. I passed the background check, everything. There is no reason that this cop should have asked me that question. He ran my license plate. He did a bunch of stuff to me that
Yes.
he didn't do to the white folks. And I'm saying that he even asked me, I had a six pack of beer in the back because I was going to a cookout with friends. And he said, "Is that six pack open?" And I said, "No, sir, it's not. They're sealed." And he said, "Well, would you be okay with me searching the car? Why are you doing this, homie? Like, why?" And he's like, "Well, do you have an issue with that?" And I'm like, "Yes, sir, I do, because it's against my rights." And he's like, "Oh, you're one of those. What does that mean exactly, bro? Because I'm black and I know my
He
rights?
meant
Or
he
what
meant
is he?"
you're one of them smart ends.
Yeah, yeah,
And it
that's
took
what
the
he
black
meant. I don't
lieutenant,
think he was
Charles. I'm
saying you
serious,
were one
bro.
of the blacks. He was just saying, "Oh, you're one of those people who think they are smart. They
Charles,
look
I
for the
swear,
law."
bro, that's the first time I feared for my life from the cops, bro. He had four guys surrounding my car and he said, "You can't leave. You're not going anywhere." If it was not for the black lieutenant coming down and criticizing him, I don't know what would have happened to me. So don't tell me that racism in America don't exist, bro, because it does.
But um you learn to live with it, and
Yes. And I'll
Wolf
even say
is
this.
young, but dude, imagine my parents who are still alive in their 80s. Dude, I was born in 1965, so I never actually had to deal with
Yes.
with
Now, I
Jim
will say
Crow,
this.
but I definitely lived with the aftermath.
Yeah.
My parents, having grown up in South Georgia, were rather open-minded.
Right.
However,
What?
essentially their advice was always keep your head on a swivel.
Yes.
Everyone,
And
my point is that anyone who says racism does not exist and literally systemic, what Wolf went through is systemic racism. These
because
are state people, these are people employed by a government. And
yes,
that is the behavior. That's the literal
and
definition of systemic
and
racism.
nobody,
It's
and Stanley,
allowed.
to clear the air, I have to clear the air on this. I was not rude to this officer. I respected him the entire time, and he still didn't give a damn.
Right.
And that's what
I've
I'm
been,
trying to get at.
dude,
Like,
I will tell you stories. There have been a couple times when I was your age and actually younger, where, and I'll tell you a story. I was maybe 30,
mm,
and I won't belabor the point. There was a black cop, and I'm sitting up, I'm meeting a girlfriend for a movie, and there's a black cop of Savannah, Georgia, who comes up and, you know, now maybe I look too free. you know, I have a job, I make a lot of money. I my girl was late. So, you know what? It's a nice Savannah evening. I hope she'll be here. So I hop my ass up on a wall and I'm just kind of looking around. So some black cop, and he was actually Savannah police, comes here, starts asking questions, and I was like, well, finally, I had to tell this dude, this
hmm
young black cop, young black cop, that he finally got to a point because maybe I was a little bit of a smart ass, won't surprise anyone, but I wasn't breaking a law. And
right.
I actually had to tell him who my father was.
Mm,
And you and you know what I literally told him? You
mm,
might want to change your attitude. My father is. Now, my father was his precinct captain.
yeah.
Like, dude, if you really want to get in trouble, fuck with me.
So
Well,
you were pulling rank,
But
Stanley.
I had to pull rank. I didn't want to do it. I
well,
tried not
and
to.
Charles, and here's the thing. I want to add this real quick in. Is that cop? I said the whole time. I said I want your superintendent. I want your lieutenant. And at first he said no. You're not allowed to do that. If I ask for your boss, you have to call him. You don't have a choice. If I ask for your lieutenant, you have to call him.
True.
Period. And he was violating my rights at that point, and he got fired, thank God. And then people say, "Oh, well, he got fired. He was just one of the bad apples." That's the point, guys. Y'all don't think there is any bad apples.
Well, it's better than that. They're growing bad apples. You get rid of some bad apples and make more.
Mm. All right.
That's all
So,
I'm trying to get at, Charles. Last thing I'll say about it, because I'll leave it alone after this, is just that we need to acknowledge these things so that America can start to progress. But until
mm,
people can stop lying to themselves about these things, Charles, that's why I understand the approach that Vivek is taking, but I don't agree with it because he's not willing to have the conversation. He's doing a Larry Elder where he wants to talk about things that are not actually going to solve it. He just dog whistles, in my opinion.
yeah, he is. He is
I
not.
think Vivek is only making it worse. Literally, I like what's her name? Vivek, and I won't say it on your show, not to make it too hot. Vivek is the R word.
Mm. Okay. So, Deacon Dave, thank you very much for the super sticker. I really appreciate that. So for me, like I mentioned earlier, maybe most of you didn't catch that. Many of these Republican candidates, they are not original thinkers, right? They just
Hmm.
rehashing the same talking points with a flavor of their own stupidity, right? Vivek is, adds his own, how will I call it, vivacious stupidity to these talking points, right? So,
Hmm.
Vivek isn't an original thinker. He's
no, he's
the,
not.
to
He's
be
not.
honest, he is the least original thinker.
In
Yeah,
fact, I think Trump is the most original thinker of the Republicans of like the
Dude,
last 10 years.
I agree with that, Charles.
dude, you are so right, Charles. Dude is just gonna do what he wants to do. It's original.
Yep.
It's original KKK, but it's original.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So, well, I think this would be a good place to draw this stream to a close. Great
Yeah.
talking to you guys. Wolf was really
Yeah,
good
I'm sorry I
having
was
you.
late, Charles. I
So,
didn't get the
I want,
notification. I think. Oh, I'm sorry. You lagged for a second. Go ahead.
yeah, no issues. So, I really want to talk, and I want Steve to be around for this. I want to talk about the Second Amendment rights with you guys.
Okay.
Oh,
I think
um,
there are some things that I'm not so clear about, and I think maybe you guys can be able to explain it better. So, Wolf, Stanley, Steve, I'll reach out to Steve
can
for
I
us to have that
ask? Can I
conversation.
make a request? Wolf,
Yeah,
Stanley,
sure.
and Steve talking about the
Oh boy,
Second Amendment.
that'll be
Yeah,
fun.
yep.
It'll be. Oh, I will send you the link before you can share this book with Steve. Carol Anderson. She's a black woman,
Mm,
probably older than I am, history professor at Emory.
mm.
She has written an excellent book on the Second Amendment.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, Deacon Dave, you say you didn't get the notification. So, did you guys turn on the notification for the channel? You need to turn that on. So
Yeah.
I don't know. YouTube does some. I don't know how YouTube runs its things, but okay.
Well, Charles, if I
So
can say something real quick, I think you're being shadow banned because you're having very, very controversial conversations. Because you don't play either
Really?
side, and that's well, like there's just some things that Charles will talk about that I don't think the left or the right really wants to hear, which is accountability. And I
Well,
think
I
that's
I
get
why
the
don't
Charles
know
has
about
notification.
punished, and that's why I respect Charles a lot because you don't bow down. You keep doing what you're doing, and that keep doing what you're doing, Charles, no matter what.
that. Yeah, yeah. So the thing is, I you may be right, but I don't want to entertain that thought. Because
Yeah,
I'd
that's just a
rather.
theory of mine. It's not proven. I can't prove it. I'm just saying that's what I think.
Yeah. So anyhow, guys, thanks, Black Laptop Hustler, Templar.
Charles, are you doing like final thoughts?
Well, okay, so let's do final thoughts. Let's do Stanley go, Wolf go,
My
then.
my final thought is SKC. Please hop on again.
Yeah.
Next show. And actually, I'd love to have SKC with Steve and Wolf and me and you.
Hmm.
That
That
would
would be
just
fun.
be excellent.
Yeah, Wolf.
I mean, I came late, so I didn't see the whole stream. But what I'll say is just, guys, like this whole Democrat Republican thing. Start thinking for yourselves. There's nothing wrong if you agree with some things on one side and disagree with some on the other. But become a free thinker and just be careful that you actually research the people that you find entertaining. And don't think that just because Vivek is smooth with words that he knows what he's talking about. Anybody can be a smooth talker, but intelligence is a whole different matter. And shout out to Stanley,
He is
Charles,
not a
Steve.
smooth talker to the black community.
Well, he's a smooth
We
talker
see.
to the MAGA people, and that's what I was referencing. So just if you're a Trump supporter, just be careful
Wolf, are you done? You cut out for a bit.
Yeah, did I cut
All
out?
right.
I'm sorry. I was just saying that I was done, Charles. That was it. I was just giving y'all shout outs, so I
All right.
appreciate it, Charles. And I'll be here for the next one.
Yeah. So, SKC, welcome. Welcome to Free Zone. Lou, welcome. Yeah. So we're ending the stream now, but my final thoughts. So let me just re-echo what Wolf said about people who smart talking people, right? Never trust a fast talking hustler, right? People who just spew out things like, oh, they're just rapping out things because one thing with Vivek, I think she knows how to memorize his lines very well, right? Memorize his lines and just come and pour them out like a very good student. But there's really little depth when you begin to see a lot of the contradictions in the statements that he makes in one scenario and another scenario. Then you just say, no, this guy is not it, right? So, well, politicians will do what they do. That's their business. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, which is trying to be as objective as possible, trying to understand things. Anybody who is 100% on one side, I really don't trust them. Oh, I'm a total conservative. I have to follow the party line. I'm a total leftist. I have to follow the party line. I mean, come on, think for yourself. Use your brain. There are some things that you look at it. Okay, you say these people are much more correct on this issue, and these other people are much more correct on another issue. That's the way life is. Life is way more nuanced than having an ideological. You just pitch your tent to one ideological position and say, no matter what, I'm going to agree with everything they say. So that's the stream for today. Thank you very much, Deacon Dave, for your super stickers. As always, really, really appreciate that. If you're coming to the channel for first time or if you've been here, just like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And I will see you guys in another live stream. It's bye for now.